Hello and welcome to a Song of Ice and Fire miniatures game battle report. In this game we're playing Vargo Hoat led by Starks, playing against Targaryens led by the new commander Marselen. I've wanted to have a game against Marselen for a little while now. He looks very interesting and very unique. He is the only commander in the game now with the Free Folk change who has the ability to spawn units into the game and increase his activation count over time. So he looks very interesting and kind of fearsome. And we have a local Targaryen player who has just recently painted him up and agreed to have a game. So the game mode we'll be playing is Clash of Kings, and here's the table. So this being Clash of Kings, you can see our three objectives across the center. Each of those in this scenario is worth 1 point for controlling it with a unit, not being engaged by an enemy with more ranks. In terms of terrain, 2 swamps have been placed by our Targaryen player. One is here and the other is here. Obviously he is intending to use those to constrict my movement, favor him. He's a Targaryen player, he obviously has means of getting around this. And then we have 1 weirwood here and 1 corpse pile here. Those have been placed by me. What I've aimed for is I put 1 corpse pile down early in this position to make this side of the terrain a little bit hostile, and as the shape emerged with the swamps being placed here and here, it became obvious kind of what my opponent's plan was, so I placed a weirwood on this side to kind of give some advantage to this side. So I am pursuing my usual strategy of making the game sides asymmetric, and in this case I have won the role for turn order and deployment, and I've chosen turn order, and my opponent has actually picked the side with the corpse pile because he wants me to be most constricted by these swamps. So there is some advantage to me either way. I'm reasonably happy with this, he is reasonably happy to this, but the decision was meaningful because the sides were asymmetric. In terms of lists, the Targaryen list is really interesting. It's a high and tight 6 activation list, which normally I would think is a little bit... Targaryens can do that, but in this case, because it's Marselen, it will quickly become a 7 or maybe even 8 activation list. So what he's running are 3 units of Unsullied, 2 Pikemen with Officers, and 1 Swordsman with Marselen. This deployment is a little bit weird, but it will quickly begin to make sense as he unpacks everything. And then we have a unit of Dothraki Outriders, the ranged unit over here, with a Disrupt. I think it's an Outrider Co in the unit because he had basically a point spare. His NCUs are Quaithe, who is the new Predictable Maneuvers, effectively NCU. Very interesting, very potentially strong. And then we have Illyrio Myopatus for healing. Probably this list should take one of these 2 Unsullied units and split it into a 3rd NCU and a 5-point unit. But there is something to be said for this formation. Relentless as an ability, the new Relentless has been on an absolute tear in our local meta. Players are getting very good results with it, it's performing very well and interesting, mostly because we are still in the phase of learning how to play against it. It's challenging to just have that rule there and know that if you swing at something, it's going to swing back immediately. And although Unsullied Pikes they don't have Sundering or Precision or anything, it's still 7 dice on 3s. It's pretty scary. For my part, this is a heavily proxied army, so don't try and make too much sense of it. This is me using my frozen dwarfs as usual, but I didn't have anything like good proxies for what I needed here. So this is a little bit of a hot mess. But over here we have Vargo Hoat in a unit of Bog Devil Trappers. The new Crannogman Bog Devil unit. I am increasingly in love with this unit. It is absolutely incredible, and it is super good with Vargo Hoat, who just wants a way to weaken enemies, and he can decapitate unit attachments as part of an attack action. It's exceptional. This unit, with Vargo Hoat in it, with Threaten, spews out weaken tokens. I've only played it once so far in this game, but it was a very good time. We then have Bloody Mummers with Ramsay Snow and Reek, and we can sort of see here, wow, those are some really shitty proxies. Yeah, they are. Ramsay Snow and Reek. This is not a good unit. It's not bad. Ramsay Snow and Reek are some of the... For 2 points, they are actually worthwhile, which is kind of rare, actually, in 2-point attachments. But you get what you pay for with Ramsay and Reek. I would normally put them in a better or more useful unit than Bloody Mama Skirmishers, but there is a specific thing that we are trying to do with this list. There is a specific piece of jank which we will get very, very close to accomplishing. This list is a little bit of a meme list, and this is part of the meme. Over here, we have a unit of Stormcrow Mercenaries with Rickon and Osha, 5 points, and that unlocks Shaggydog. And then we have a unit of Bolton Cutthroats, a very efficient 5-point unit. It could be, realistically, they could be Lysine Sellswords, another equally good 5-point unit, but the Bolton Cutthroats play better with Vargo Hoat, who has a card that lets you attack top of round. So the Bolton Cutthroats are maximized, but 2 units in this list actually have advantages for attacking the enemy before they have activated, which gives me some really interesting ability to front load my turn, and that plays well with Vargo Hoat's Relentless or Reckless Aggression card. Then, because we've got Bran, we've got Summer, and our 2 NCUs are Arya, essential in an all-infantry force like this, and then Sansa. Sansa is not exactly part of the meme, but if you are doing some kind of a play in Starks that relies on 1 or 2 particular tactics cards, the fact that Sansa can go fishing for them and get them back from your discard pile means you can spend them without holding on to them. So I have a combo I'm going to try and execute with this list, which we will on the very last turn of the game, and I get to actually spend some of the cards that are part of that combo before we reach the end of the game, and then get them back with Sansa, which is really interesting. So I have no range units in this list, and also because I'm trying to build a particular combo, it's important for me to take the letters. So I elect to go first. This does mean that my opponent is going to be able to take the swords and shoot me with his archer unit on the second turn because he will have first turn, but I am willing to risk that basically in exchange for 1, having first crack at the letters, and 2, being first player on the third turn. If you're an all melee army, that's the first, generally speaking, that'll be the earliest that you will be in melee, although this game would be an exception. And so I'm usually okay going first if I'm running no range units whatsoever. So by the end of the first turn, we've had some rapid advances happening. And if this looks a little bit whack, I would encourage you to go and look at some other Stark videos that I have posted, because this is the kind of thing that Arya does. So what has happened that's led to this game state? Well, I have taken the letters and I've drawn 2 cards, and my opponent, because he's playing Marselen, actually has drawn the Summon Freedmen card. So he has taken the swords as his first activation to stop me from blocking it, which I probably would have if he'd given me the opportunity. That has summoned in a unit of Freedmen, which has brought him immediately up to 7 activations, so now the activation advantage I have has begun to narrow. But that let me take the horse with Sansa and move Vargo's unit forward. Everything otherwise has just begun to kind of move forward. Stuff has sort of shifted up, etc. I have used my slight activation advantage to not move this unit into range of the Outriders. Actually, what am I talking about? The swords has already been claimed, so I have no risk of moving this unit into the Outriders, so I have just bum rushed them forward, and my hope is actually to get into them early on the second turn. But for now, I have accepted the fact that this unit might get shot, and I'm particularly willing to accept that, because with the movement from the horse and then a movement from Arya, Vargo's unit has gotten into melee. Now, he's only done 3 damage there, which is to be expected against a unit with shield wall, but because he was within range to weaken them when he activated using Threaten, he's applied both a weaken token and a poison, and then he spent the weaken token to assassinate the Unsullied Officer. So, although there's only 3 points of damage to this Unsullied Pikemen unit, it's down its officer, which means Relentless doesn't trigger, it means Go Down Fighting doesn't trigger, and they are poisoned. So this is now a very winning fight. Otherwise, we've moved up in a basically as aggressively as we can, but we are looking to hit potentially this flank over here and wipe out these Outriders, and then the infantry quality over here weighs against me hugely. There is a massive difference between Marselen's Unsullied, these Unsullied, and the Freedmen, and this functional chaff that I have. There's 1 unit in Bloody Mummers, which has 1 wound in Bloody Mummers, which has come from a crown sap, just for reference. But if we can kill this, pivot in with Summer, and basically have this attrition fight grind in our favor while spamming out weaken tokens with Vargo. Obviously, we cannot weaken the Unsullied. We can weaken the Unsullied Swordsman, but we can't spend the weakened token. Maybe we can't even weaken them. Anyway, we can tilt these fights in our favor. And if there was ever going to be units that would fight against Relentless well, it is Counterstrike and Disrupt Bloody Mummers, and Counterstrike and Stubborn Tenacity. Some crappy Stormcrow Mercenaries, but still a unit with Rickon and Osha in it. So this is the beginning of the second turn, and at this point I think I'm actually going to play Reckless Aggression and we are going to push. So let's jump forward. So here's the beginning of the third turn, and we can see that certain plans have come into fruition. For example, on this flank here, what happened? Well, as expected, I got shot, but in the turn that I got shot, I spent the second Arya token and moved them up into point-blank range. He couldn't not claim the swords. He had to block me on that, and he blocked me on the bags. He basically did 2 NCU activations. He took the swords, he took the bags to keep me from taking either of those, which meant that the horsemen were unactivated, which meant I slammed into them with the Cutthroats, which did 1 auto wound with Hodor, and then there's still 6 dice on 2 ranks, and because they Outriders hadn't activated, I got to reroll attacks and make them vulnerable, did a bunch of damage, and then I followed up with an Assault Orders, and again, 6 dice, rerolls, vulnerable, and vicious, with this corpse pile nearby, has taken out the Outriders in 2 shots. He's able to recover from that. He isn't able to heal them because he's got NCUs on the board already. He's blocked me from the bags, for example. So this has basically just been wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. And this is when you have cards like Vargo Hoat with Reckless Aggression, you really want to play those in Starks when you have Assault Orders in hand. So you can capitalize on your opponent's rush into the early zones or mitigate basically your opponent rushes to the good zones early. That's the cost of getting to play that card. And what it's done over here is basically inflicted more weakened. The actual Reckless Aggression effect was not that great. But having Assault Orders in hand means you still get a great turn of NCU activations on the tactics board, even though your opponent has the first choice of things. So what else has happened over here? Well, these freedmen are dead. And how did the freedmen die? They got one shot by Summer. She actually only did 2 wounds to them on the attack, but she played Northern Ferocity, which is basically an excellent card on direwolves, and one of the reasons why, even though Summer is probably the worst direwolf, she is still totally fine in most Stark armies, because Northern Ferocity gives you Vicious, and if you are only on 1 rank, which direwolves always are, gives you +2 damage to the panic check. So immediately we have -2 to their panic check, +2 to the panic check damage, which meant that when Summer moved in and charged the freedmen, even though she rolled badly on her attacks and they made a save, I did something like 5 damage with the subsequent panic check, which wiped them out and let her surge forth to here. Otherwise, there's just kind of a slow grind happening. I like this fight and this fight, these guys are basically doing nothing to one another. I may actually have healed these with the bags. Shaggydog has jumped onto this objective. These units are just slowly posturing. I am in no rush to start taking these fights because, as I mentioned before, the unit quality that I have is significantly lower than the unit quality my opponent has. But at the end of this turn, I'm on 4 points because I've killed the Outriders and I've seized all 3 objectives. We've got Shaggydog here, Rickon and Osha here, and then Bran and Hodor over here, sitting on all 3. So even though the core of my opponent's strength is intact, I have accrued a massive scenario lead, and the tempo is with me in a significant way. I can probably fight defensively if I want to for the rest of the game, and come out ahead thanks to that early scenario lead, but I have plans to do otherwise. So here we are at the start of turn 4, and we can see that turn 3 has been a bloody one. Bran and Hodor have just hung out where they are. That's totally fine. They're scoring points every turn. They've done their damage. But lots is happening over here. We can see that these 2 units, the Mummers and the Stormcrow Mercenaries, are badly bloodied. And that's to be expected. They are fighting high-quality units and units with Relentless. However, I have been able to inflict plenty of damage back. In particular, Counterstrike and Disrupt and just Counterstrike and Summer Tenacity has all had good effect over here. We've been able to sort of trickle down some of the damage on the Unsullied Pikes in particular before we've brought Summer around and hit them in the rear. And Summer has actually survived making this attack, despite the fact that the Unsullied cracked back at her because of all of this weaken from Vargo. Vargo is sort of exactly within 12 inches of them, and he is throwing out his unit buffs from the Bog Devils. He's throwing out Weakened with Threaten, which doesn't need line of sight, it just needs long range when they activate. He's putting out 2 weakened tokens a turn, and just in terms of other condition tokens, Ramsay over here, Theon, Reek and Ramsay have been putting out 3 panic tokens a turn every turn, basically since turn 2. Now, it's against Unsullied, who are morale 4. It's very difficult to actually make a crack through that, but it doesn't hurt. It panic significantly increases even Unsullied chance to fail, and it's beginning to add up. Although this fight over here between the Bog Devils and the Unsullied Pikes is looking like a bit of a stalemate, and to an extent it kind of is, it is sucking down resources. My opponent is having to heal this unit. It's basically getting Illyrio's activation every single turn, and so they're drawing in force multiplication to keep them alive, which lets me allocate force toward the rest of this line. And there's only going to be one more turn that you'll be able to see, and there's actually going to be a picture of the action. This is going to be effectively the second last turn. At the end of this turn, because this unit is on 1 rank, I'm going to score here again, and I'm going to score here, which is going to put me up to 6 points, which puts me in reach of a victory next turn. And in fact, all I'm going to need is a couple of kills. In fact, if I get 2 kills next turn, that will put me on 8, which would let me score these 2 zones for the win, even though I'm not not securing this one anymore. And that is what's basically going to happen. What will happen is I will take the swords, and Summer will wipe this unit out. Sorry, correction. My opponent will take the swords. He will not be able to capitalize. I will play assault orders, I think, and I will kill this unit with Summer, and she will move over here. This fight will continue to happen. Fueled by Slaughter is basically keeping Ramsay and the Goobers alive, and what we're going to try and do is we're going to finally, at the 11th hour here, set up the play. And this is the play. So what we have here is we have Summer. She has come into the rear of this unit of Unsullied Pikemen. They were on almost full health, and she's done, I think, 3 wounds with her attacks. I would have liked to have done 4. 4 would put, they were already wounded very slightly. 4 would actually have put this unit inside 1-shot range. And the reason is that you can stack these 2 cards. So I've drawn back Northern Ferocity with Sansa when she took a zone in the previous turn. I put this back into my hand. And on the attack, I've played Northern Ferocity. So that means that the attack is vicious, so -2 to the panic check roll, and +2 damage because of Northern Ferocity. Then it's in the rear, so that's another -2. And then I've played the Crippler's Infamy. This is a Bloody Mama unit because Vargo is in it, which means we have another -2 to the panic check, and at the end of the check, if it's a fail, I can spend the weakened for a further -2 to the roll, to the damage, which means that in total, what we have here is an attack, or a panic check rather, that is doing -6 to the roll, +4 to the damage. Now, if we were engaged with the Ramsay and Reek unit, which is a Bloody Mama unit, this would actually go up to -7 +5, which is one of the most horrifying panic checks I think I have seen in the game, and part of why I wanted to play this list. That is massive panic check damage. That is actually more panic check damage than old There's Too Many hits, which could sometimes get up to, like minus a lot +4 damage. This outperforms that. Now, obviously I have to have a rear charge, but nothing like a wolf for that. But this is also something that you can do like in miniature or in major a couple of times in a game. Because of Northern Ferocity being pulled back by Sansa, as soon as you draw it, you'll get to play it 2 or 3 times. And it is super dangerous on these wolves, particularly if you've got panic tokens floating around, for example, from Ramsay and Reek. So she doesn't actually kill this unit. She blows almost all the way through it. She does 7 damage with the panic check and leaves 1 guy alive. But it is a poisoned unit in melee. Now, as it actually happens, rather than let my opponent activate it, I just deliver the coup de grace by taking the crowns, and I play a second copy of the Crippler's Infamy, which is a panicked -3 check, so he needs to roll a 7 with a panic token, and he fails, and I kill the last member of an Unsullied unit with the crown. So the death of this unit puts me up to 8 VPs, and then I'm scoring 2 zones this turn, so that puts me to 10, which means that this is an end of turn 4. I want to say 10-0 win. My opponent didn't actually kill a unit by the time the game ended. So that's the list basically and the play. I was very happy with this. It was a meme, but there is something here. I want to experiment with this a little bit more. What we might do, I'm not 100% on this, but what we might do is we might put I don't know, I'd like to find points to turn the Bloody Mummers into something a little bit more dangerous. It might not be possible. Another option might be that we cut back on the wolf shenanigans. We cut down from 8 activations, we go down to 7, and we upgrade our unit quality kind of across the board generally. But even if we don't do that, I think the list worked really well. It was very fun to play. Bog Devils continue to be one of just my favorite releases. They have weaknesses. Being only a 5+ save is definitely kind of a challenge for them. They can absolutely get hammered, but they are proving just so incredibly useful in so many configurations. They bring so much utility that I really like them. I also got to play a bunch of mercenaries in this list of different types. It was very cool. So overall, fantastic game, super interesting. Got to do the thing with the cards, and I'm beginning to cotton on a little bit to how I think I want to play Starks. So this was really interesting. I hope you enjoyed it, and stay tuned for more.